In this video, I'm going to show you how to run frequencies for the variables in the data set. This is always the first step you should carry out when you've just collected your data from a survey, just to give you an idea how all of the questions have been answered. I'll also use this video to explain some of the menus that you find in SPSS across the top here, as well as what some of these icons mean. So all of the statistical operations that you can carry out in SPSS, you access from the Analyze menu. So if I click on the Analyze menu, you can see you've got a very long list of statistical procedures. We're only going to be using a couple for our analysis. And we're going to start with descriptive statistics at the top. So when I select descriptive statistics, you can see we've got a drop-down menu, and I'm going to choose the first one here, frequencies. When I choose that, a new dialog box opens up, and this allows me to select the variables that I want to run frequencies on. So this is what SPSS dialog boxes look like. On the left-hand side here, I have a list of all of the variables in the data set, and then by selecting on the variables and then clicking on this arrow button in the middle, I can move the variables that I want to run the frequencies into this variables windows here. So I've moved the first variable across, that's gender, but I'm also going to select all of these variables, and I'm not going to do that one at a time. I'm just going to select age group, put my finger on the shift button, scroll down to the bottom, select all like that. Then I can click all of those over. So now I've collected all of the variables, so I can run the frequencies on all of these. You see we've got a few more options here. We can do charts, we can look at the formats. We're not going to be using these. I don't recommend that you use SPSS to generate graphs. It's far more professional to actually generate graphs in Excel. You can choose some statistics options, and I'll just click on that menu just to show you what the options are. Here you can see that you can calculate means and medians, so your central tendencies. You can do percentile values. You can also calculate methods of dispersion. I've just shown you this because it's useful to know that they are available, but we are using categorical data. We're using non-parametric data, so the assumptions that these data are normally distributed does not apply. It is meaningless, therefore, to calculate central tendencies or measures of dispersion. So we're not actually going to be choosing any of those statistics options. So I'm just going to shut that down, and I'm just going to run the frequency tables. So what's happened now is SPSS has now opened a new window, and this is the output. This is the output window. What you have here on the left-hand side is you have a log of all of the procedures that you've run in SPSS. This can be the analysis, this can be any data manipulations that you've done. So that's a running log of your activity in SPSS. And here in this window here, we have the output. You can see at the top, I'm actually now working in a new file. This is output one document, and so it's not the same file as the data file. Okay, so this is a separate file. If I just click on the window tab here, and you can see that I can scroll between different windows. At the moment, you can see I'm on this new output window, which SPSS has simply called output one, but you can see that the second data set here, I seem to have an untitled data set as well, so just ignore that. But you can see that I have the second window. If I click on that, that will take me back to the teaching data set. So you can easily scroll between your data set file and your output file. So returning to the output file, at the top here, I have a list of all of the variables that I've asked SPSS to run frequencies on. It's quite a wide window, but down below you can see we have the frequency tables for all of the variables. So we've got gender first. one thing that's quite useful when you do look at the frequencies for each of the variables is just get an idea of the distribution, and particularly if there's any missing cases. So we look at gender. There's a little bit of a bias towards women in the survey. That's very, very normal. You will find that in most surveys that women are more likely to complete a survey than men. So there's a slight female bias. If we look at the age group, we can see it's a reasonable distribution, although there's more people aged 65 and over, although that is also an open-ended age group. It's much bigger than the other age groups. Or you can see that there's maybe slightly fewer people in these in these kind of later middle age groups. Fortunately, there aren't many missing values here. Not many people refuse to answer this, so we don't have to worry too much about missing values. Marital status, here you can see the different categories. Again, very few missing values. Whether the respondent has any children in the household, there are no missing values here because it was actually a derived variable, so there's no missing values there. Higher education, the highest educational qualification obtained, you can see it goes from degree to no qualification. Again, very few missing values. The next one is a measure of income. There's a problem with this, even though we might think income might be quite useful to understand people's views on climate change. We can see that actually, unfortunately, it's missing for about half of the population, half of the sample population. And that could well be if they're not in work, for example, which is why there's a lot of missing cases here. Then we have the NSEC occupational class. This is the occupational classification that's used by the Office for National Statistics, and the NSEC can be shown at different levels of hierarchy, and this is the most generic. So there are 5 categories here, and as you can see, it distinguishes between managerial and professional, intermediate, employers in small organizations, and own account workers. That's basically the self-employed. Lower supervisory and technical occupations, semi-routine and routine occupations. There aren't many missing cases here. Even though there will be retired people in the survey, the NSEC can be calculated on last occupation. So fortunately, there aren't many missing values here. And then we have the climate change variable, which is the variable we're interested in. I've actually selected this teaching data set to exclude all missing variables. So that's why all missing values, which is why there's no missing values here. How much interest do you have in politics? Again, you can see this question was asked using a Likert style design question. And this has been quite well answered. So most people have answered that with only one missing value. Did you manage to vote at the general election? Unfortunately, about a third of people haven't answered that. We might maybe conclude that they might not have answered. We might want to maybe assume that the people who didn't answer maybe that's equivalent to not voting in the general election. There's a question next on how often have you volunteered in the last 12 months? Again, most people have not answered this question. Again, we might conclude that that means that they're not volunteering. And then we also have another question that's very similar about recent involvement in political activity. Again, a high level of non-response here. So you can see 73.5% of people have not responded there. And there's a question here about people like me don't have any say about what the government does. Another question about politics. Again, most people have skipped it. And then finally, we have another question on party political affiliation. This one has at least got much higher level of response with the majority, 94.7, actually having a valid answer. So not too many missing cases there. So those are the variables that we have. We can see that some are obviously maybe going to be more useful than others because we have some issues with missing cases. Just to explain a little bit more at the end of this video about some of these menus. I've already showed you the window menu, which is useful to be able to toggle between your output and your data set. We're not going to be using extensions, utilities, or graphs. I've already said, and I'll say again, I don't recommend you use SPSS to create graphs. It is better to use SPSS. We will be using analyze. We won't be using format. We won't be using insert. We will be using the transform menu. This allows you to recode variables, and that's a very important part of survey analysis. So this allows you to transform your data set. The actual data menu also allows you to make changes to your data set. For example, you can, this is at the bottom, very useful, is you can select cases. So if you wanted to carry out an analysis on just one part of your survey, for example, you just wanted to carry out among younger people, you could choose to select cases that comply to particular criteria. We're not going to use the view or the edit. And finally, the file menu is, as you would expect, it allows you to save your files. So you might want to start off by saving your output file. A good tip for output is that if I'm saving my output file, I don't want to save it here. I do want to save it in my OneDrive. I'm just going to move it, just going to find it, the folder that I want to put it in. You have to excuse me a minute. I have to move through a few folders. What I'm going to call this climate change. And a good tip if you're doing lots of SPSS analysis, particularly if you're doing more complex analysis, if you do become more advanced, is put the date that you carried out. So I'm actually doing this a bit in advance of this teaching session. I'm doing it on the 27th of October 2023. And I'm going to call it climate change 24th of October 2023, and that's my output. And that's really useful. I'd also do the same when I'm saving my data sets. It means that you can easily work back through the analysis that you've done. So that's more useful when you're starting to do more advanced analysis, but it's a good tip to learn at the start to date your output files and also your data files. So I've saved my output. The only other thing that I need to explain are some of these icons here. That's just a quick icon to open. You're going to recognize that as print, a print preview. Well, most of these we aren't going to use, but this one is useful. The recall recently used dialogues. If I click on this, this will list dialog boxes that I've recently used. So you can see here that I can easily navigate to the frequencies dialog box. It's easier if I know I want to go back and do some frequencies. If I click on that, I can go straight to the dialog box. And that is just easier than going back to analyze to descriptors across. It's just a really good shortcut when you're doing running lots of different statistical procedures. That will open up the dialog box. The other good thing is it will open up the dialog box as you left it. So if you have any settings, they will be saved. Most of these other icons, though, we're not going to be using.